I've got some apologies already from Councillor Hardy, Councillor Holm, Councillor Sani. And apart from that, I think all the rest of you are here, which is a good start. So, yep. Okay, emergency evacuation procedures.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members, colleagues. There is no planned fire alarm for today. So if the fire alarm does actuate, if you can please make your way out of the doors either directly in front of me or behind me and make your way out to the front of the building where we'll have a roll call. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be right behind Simon. Right, okay. I haven't received any declarations of interest. No. Public access, I haven't received any of that either. So just welcome you all and confirm that the committee, for the benefit of the recording, committee meetings taking place at Headquarters in Portishead. We're also recording the meeting for the public to view on the Fire Authority YouTube channel. I'd now like to ask members to introduce themselves. I'll start. My name's Brenda Massey. I'm currently chair, and this is my last ever Fire Authority meeting. Oh, I was hoping you'd say "ah" and not "yippee." Right, so I think most of you are around that way, so I'll start. Okay. Steve.
Thank you. Good morning, Steve Smith, Councillor for Westbury-on-Tyrone and Henleys in Bristol City Council.
Richard Eddie Brust.
Councillor Dan Thomas, Congsby and Puxton on North Somerset Council.
Robert Payne, Councillor for Weston-super-Mare Central and North Somerset Council.
Robin Moss, Councillor for Westfield in Bath and North East Somerset.
Paul May, I'm a Baines councillor and I represent Pensford and Whitchurch Village.
Great, thank you. And now we'll go to...
Can you just turn off your microphone, Councillor? Thank you, super.
I'm now going to ask officers to introduce themselves, so I'll start with the...
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again. Simon Shilton, your Chief Forester and Chief Exec.
On councillors, colleagues, Richard Welch, Assistant Chief Fire Officer.
Hello, Alison Phillips, Supplies and Procurement Officer.
Tanya Nathan, Supplies and Procurement Manager.
Good morning, Luke Gazzard, Area Manager, Head of Service Improvement.
Good morning, I'm Ian Potter, I'm Head of Service Transformation and the HMI CFRS Liaison.
Good morning, Claire Bentley, Head of Finance.
Good morning, Jane Williams-Locke, Deputy Director of Corporate Services.
Good morning, Emma Bowen, Democratic Services Assistant.
Good morning, Verity Lee, Statutory Finance Officer.
Good morning, Amanda Brown, Clark to Avon Fire Authority. And can I just also introduce, so we've got Robin Glaze on the screen behind you. He's on leave, but very, very kindly agreed to be available for this meeting. He's our pensions advisor, and you'll notice you've got 2 pension reports in your pack. So if we have any questions that we can't deal with in the room, Robin's kindly agreed to help us out. Thank you, Robin.
Right, thank you for that. I wanted to make you aware that Councillor Liz Brennan has left the Fire Authority with immediate effect as she's taken on additional responsibilities at South Gloss Council. And we'd like to thank her for her service on the authority and send her our best wishes for the future. She has been replaced by Councillor Chris Murphy, who will be joining the authority in the next municipal year. And I'll hand over to...
Thank you, Chair. Members, colleagues, some sad news to share with you. It is with deepest sadness that I share the news that John Thompson sadly passed away. John worked with Avon Fire and Rescue Service for well over 40 years, and he started his career as a firefighter. And most recently, John had been working in the vulnerable adults team as one of our community safety advisors and fitters. I'd like to propose that members join me to hold a minute's silence to remember John. But before doing that, some more sad news, I'm afraid. Some former colleagues of ours have also just recently passed away, and it would be remiss of me not to mention them, given that we're also recognising and remembering John. Former firefighter John Chisholm, who retired in 1987, he recently passed away, aged 91. Very sadly, one of John's former colleagues, Andrew Crocker, who was also a vulnerable adults community safety worker, sadly and suddenly left us last July, but fell ill whilst he was on holiday with his family and passed away a week or so ago. And also, we informed this week that former Divisional Commander Monty Britton, who joined Bristol Fire Brigade in 1952 and retired in 1986. Monty was a very well-known officer in the service, both during his time as a serving officer and for many years after that, with his association with the Pensioners Association. And Monty was awarded the British Empire Medal about 2 or 3 years ago as well. Sadly, Monty passed away earlier this week at a ripe old age of 95 after a short illness. So members, I'd invite you to join me for a minute's silence in remembrance of both John, Andrew and Monty.
Okay. The Fire Authority has now published its pre-election guidance, which remains in place until the polls close on the 2nd of May. Elections are taking place in Bristol City Council and for the Avon and Somerset Police and Crime Commissioner. Members and officers are encouraged to read the guidance emailed on Friday the 15th of March and to act in accordance with it. Fire Authority meetings will continue to deal with the day-to-day business for the Fire Authority.
Thank you, Chair. Members, colleagues, I made a presentation to Councillor Brenda Massey at our last full Fire Authority meeting in March, but as Brenda has identified earlier on, this is our last meeting as Chair of this committee, and on behalf of us all, I want to reiterate my thanks for her role and services to Avon Fire Authority and wish her all the very best for the future. So thank you, Brenda.
Thank you. I will miss all of you. But can I remind you to put your phones on silent and also remind you to use your microphones when speaking and to remember to turn them off afterwards. So, any voting required will take place by asking members for a show of hands, any votes against, any abstentions and any votes for. And I think we can now move into the main body of the meeting. Now we've got all the bits and pieces out of the way. So the first one is the minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee held on the 13th of December 2023. And I'd like to move that they are correct.
Do you want to also move the confidential minutes?
Yeah.
If members agree and don't have any questions on the confidential minutes, we can do them en bloc, if that's okay.
Yeah. So that's the confidential minutes of the ordinary meeting of the Policy and Resources Committee held on the 13th of December 2023. And I'll move those are a correct record if somebody would second them. Thank you. Okay. Are they approved? Any? Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Votes in favour? Yeah. I think that's everyone.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, then we'll move on to item 7, which is the re-engagement, re-employment and abatement policy. And I think Jane Williams-Locke is going to present. present this as Deputy Director of Corporate Services.
Thank you, Chair. This is a decision paper in relation to the new re-engagement, re-employment and abatement policy. This policy will give the service the ability to expand its re-employment, re-engagement of service operational personnel, where it is in the best interest of the service and provided the member of staff accepts an abatement of their pension. This policy treats all operational staff the same. Following an external and internal recruitment process, the successful candidates will be issued with a limited time-bound contract of up to and no more than 24 months, with no ability to renew the contract. If you turn to page 19 of your committee papers, 5.6 provides details of the Fire and Rescue Service National Framework, England, in which it states the Fire and Rescue Authorities must not reappoint principal officers after retirement, save for exceptional circumstances, when such a decision is necessary in the interests of public safety. You will note at 5.7 of your papers, the new scheme of delegations which underpins the Fire Authority commitment to operational independence enables the CFO-CE to exercise all matters of day-to-day administration and operational management of services and functions. Therefore, in exceptional circumstances and in the interest of public safety, a principal officer may be reappointed at the discretion of the CFO-CE. 5.12, page 20 of your committee papers, provides definitions of the three categories, these being re-employment, re-engagement and abatement. An employee must accept pension abatement, and therefore no cost would be incurred by the service because there will be no requirement to pay sums into the pension fund equivalent to the abatement which would otherwise apply. I think that's the end of my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Steve?
Yeah, I mean, this makes perfect sense. The NHS has been doing this for years, but I'm just curious why it only applies to principal officers and why the 2-year limit on a reappointment or re-engagement.
So the paper suggests that it applies to everybody, the same, not for principal officers. The reference to principal officers is a national framework within the national framework in 2018, and we haven't had a renewed national framework. So the policy itself is to be applied on application on where there are shortage of skills, an example, and for a limited period, and also for full-time employment only. So it applies to all staff. Yeah, 2-year limit for everybody. Because that should allow us sufficient time for succession planning or any to replace that skills shortage, because it will be on a skills shortage and safety consideration, community safety consideration.
Do you want to propose? Yeah, you're approving the policy. Yes. So if you'd like to propose and seek a seconder.
Right, I'll propose that we accept the paper.
Could I second, Chairman?
Thank you. You got it in there before I could ask. Very good. Thank you.
Any abstentions or any votes against? All those in favour? Thank you.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, and in that case, back to you again, Jane, please, for item 8, the immediate detriment, immediate choice interest issue.
Thank you, Chair.
This paper concerns an issue which has arisen since the committee last met on the 13th of December 2023 regarding the implementation of immediate detriment regulations. Legislation was passed on the 1st of October 2023, which puts in place the ability to rectify the pensions of all members of public service pension schemes in regard to age discrimination. There is a statutory obligation on public service pension schemes to remedy immediate detriment pensions by the 31st of March 2025. This report focuses on impacted staff who have already retired but not yet receiving their full pension benefits under the immediate detriment remedy. There are 36 previous members of staff in this position. In addition to this, all members that retired under immediate detriment are also affected by the interest issue. His Majesty's Treasury agreed a compensation arrangement for those retired members who qualify for immediate detriment payments, plus interest of 8% on arrears of pensions and lump sum. However, there are a number of issues to be resolved, including the HMRC recent announcement that it intends to impose a tax charge for any interest rate payments above a commercial rate, this being base rate plus 1%. There are no additional the LGA has suggested 3 potential solutions to the tax on interest issue, which is outlined in the cover paper as option 1, 2 and 3 on page 45 of your committee papers. The service recommends a hybrid approach whereby to continue the pause for 10 weeks until the 30th of June 2024 in the hope that His Majesty's Treasury publishes a written ministerial statement to instruct scheme managers to exempt interest payments from tax before changes are made to the tax legislation. In the event the tax position is not clarified by the 30th of June 2024, then administrators should implement option 3, issuing the immediate choice remedial service statements, which excludes interest payments until the tax position is clarified. There are no additional financial implications other than the added work required by the service's pension administrators to calculate interest payments at a later date when the tax position has been clarified. An update will be provided to this committee at the next meeting on the 25th of July 2024. Thank you.
Can I just add for clarity, because I know we've got a pension board member here, normally a paper such as this seeking a pension decision would first go to the local pension board, because the local pension board is comprised of both employees and employer representatives. This came about after the pension board meeting in January. The next meeting's not until July, and it was felt that it was an important issue and LGA's advice needed to be considered by members. So you have got all 3 options in front of you. The hybrid option, option 3, is the one that's recommended simply because it attempts to stop pension administrators, and we've got new pension administrators, having to do calculations on every case twice, i.e. now and later. If we can just get this tax issue clarified, they only have to touch the case once, which is obviously much more efficient. But there are weeks delay to this, and Robin's here to answer any questions that might arise. So I'll hand over to questions and see if we can help.
Yes, Richard?
Councillor Smith has a question. Obviously, he's more informed than me, but the officer's report seems so commonsensical to me, so I'd be very happy to go with the recommendation.
Thanks. So I agree with Richard, but I just want to check, and this might be asking impossible crystal ball gazing, but just knowing the history of this, how much confidence can we have that the Treasury will have sorted this out in the next 10 weeks?
Quite.
And even if they do get this ministerial statement out, will we then be in a position to start issuing payments straight away, or are we then relying on someone to go away and make a calculator and update systems, which in the past has taken much, much longer?
I think the statement that I read in the LGA update clarified that they were waiting for Parliament to come back from the Easter recess, and it was on their list of urgent things immediately they came back. But equally, I don't know how accurate that is. Robin, have you got anything you can add to this, please?
Yeah, the calculator is ready to go on the basis that we assumed, so there should be no further delay.
So am I right in thinking then that if the Treasury get this statement out before the end of June, we can then do the payments and do them once, rather than doing it partially and then doing it again when the interest is sorted out?
Robin is nodding.
Yeah, perfect. That makes, yeah, fine, thank you.
So, worst case scenario, if it is still passed at the end of June, the remedy payments will still be made. It is just the interest that will be held back until, yeah.
Looking at the paper, it does all seem to make sense, but I do feel slightly uncomfortable with the fact that we're delaying payments to people who may need it, or at all that we're delaying payments to people. So I just wonder if there is a member who is facing hardship or something, is there any scope for us to be making partial payments to them or something like that in a special case?
Yeah, so in answer to that, obviously all retired colleagues are receiving a pension, perhaps just not one of their choice in terms of their legacy scheme because of transition to the 2015 scheme. So it's a difference in pension benefits between the two schemes in the period of time in which it came into play is where the discrepancy lies in terms of the additional payments that need to be made. But yes, we absolutely have that and have applied it previously, that provision to, for individual members to make a hardship case, and we look at each case on merit, and there has been occasions where we have approved expediency of immediate choice, and there's also been circumstances where we have paused and continued until such times as the remedy is in place. So we have got that mechanism in place, Councillor, yeah.
We can add that to the recommendations that the Chief Fire Officer will consider any applications based on undue hardship.
Yeah, absolutely, it just reinforces a previous decision that authority made probably around about 12-18 months now when it came to light around the changes for the 2015 and immediate detriment and immediate choice. Yeah.
Can't remember the exact wording, but it was definitely in place while we were waiting for the calculators to be done and the regulations to be issued. We had that same provision in place then, that if someone was going to suffer severe financial hardship, that we could look at that. Okay. Any other questions? So if we tweak the recommendations then in view of that conversation, so you're being asked it's on the first page, page 44 actually. So committee is asked to instruct the scheme administrators of the firefighters pension scheme to continue to pause the issuing of the ICRSSs to eligible retirees until 30th of June 24 in the hope that HM Treasury and HMRC provide clarity, possible exemption on tax to be applied on interest payments, and the GAD calculator will be ready for use for consistency in calculating figures. And then B, in the event that clarity is not forthcoming from HM Treasury and HMRC by the 30th of June 24, authorise the Pension Scheme Administrators to start issuing ICRSSs with a view to processing remedy payments to eligible retirees without any calculation payment of interest on arrears, so that aspect is calculated separately after the tax issue is clarified. And I suggest we add a new C and make C D, and the new C will be the Chief Fire Officer to consider during the pause period any applications by retirees for earlier pension processing on the grounds of undue hardship. Okay, and then the current C will then be D, and requests an update on this issue as reported to the committee meeting on 25th July, but it will also go first to the local pension board because that's earlier in July. Okay, are members happy with that proposal? Is that fair? Have I worded that as you wanted? Super.
Just to clarity on the applications, we do form a very small board to look at each of those applications, so we have some diversity of ensuring that a fair approach is made to each claim of financial hardship, which includes our pension advisor as well.
Super. I can add that at the end as well. Okay. Applications to be considered by a board. Okay, super. Are you happy to propose, Brenda?
Yeah, I'm happy to propose. Can I have a seconder? Richard?
Richard, thank you.
Okay.
Any abstentions? Any votes against? Votes in favour? Thank you.
It's unanimous.
Oh, sorry, Robin, yes. Getting carried away. Thank you so much for being available. We did appreciate it. And you are now released to enjoy the rest of your holiday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy Wales.
Thank you, Robin.
Bye. Right. Where have we got to? Gone over the page too far, I think. That's it. Yeah, I went over too far. Okay, next one is item 9, service improvement, which includes transformation programme, HMI CFRS action plan and efficiency and savings. And I think that's a double act with Ian and Luke.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So this paper starts on page 49 of your packs. And this paper is for members to note the report and make any recommendations it sees fit. So as you may have noticed, this is a new type of report. Previously, this was a report from the Transformation Project and team, but it now incorporates HMI CFRS and also the Savings and Efficiency Project, so slightly longer. Progress made against HMI CFRS reports, transformation and the efficiency savings project are now put onto a new digital system that's been developed in service. It's called the Improvement Register, and we've also got performance dashboards, which are really, really useful to monitor and track progress. We then feed into the newly formed Service Improvement Board. So just on this Service Improvement Board, that board has been set up to monitor progress, primarily against the causes of concerns and the accelerated causes of concerns following the recent inspection. The Service Improvement Board will provide additional oversight and assurance to the strategic intent that we aim to deliver and the commitment to making our communities safer and the organisation stronger in its actions. The Service Improvement Board is made up of internal and external stakeholders. Chief Fire Officer chairs that meeting, but we also have representatives from the Unitary Authority, SORI, Bristol Women's Voice, the NFCC and the LGA. And their primary role is to act as a critical friend and measure our performance and quality to ensure the actions that we think we've completed. So far, there's been 3 meetings. They initially set up as a monthly meeting, but as progress, and we're on track with progress, that's now been extended to a bi-monthly meeting. So all that information is then gathered by the Chief Officer, who then also attends the Fire Performance Oversight Group, which is a meeting in London. That was attended a few months back now, actually, by the Chair of the Authority and the Vice Chair, and that is for the Chief Fire Officer to go and deliver to HMIC, NFCC, Home Office and the LGA, and for an opportunity for the Chief to deliver the progress of the service up until that point. So I'm just going to go on to the performance track, and as you'll notice, we've got some lovely colour scheme schematics from the new improvement register that we've got in service, and I'm just going to talk around some of our projects and actions in relation to those. So first of all, when we look at the accelerated causes of concerns, there were 10 actions initially created for that. All 10 actions are now complete, and the HMIC came back in a couple of weeks ago actually to look at those, and we're still awaiting their final verdict on what they looked at. In relation to site-specific risk information, you'll note on this report actually that there's 25 actions, 12 are still on track and 13 have completed. I went back into the system this morning actually, and I'm really satisfied to see that all 25 actions are now moved over to completed. So in relation to those 2 accelerated causes of concern, there's been an absolutely huge amount of progress in quite a short space of time. So I think it's really worth acknowledging both Assistant Chief Officers and their teams and how they've progressed that piece of work through to completion. Moving on to the causes of concern, when we look at prevention, I'm just going to look at the 2 in red, which are the 2 that are off track. Just discuss those through with you. The reason they're off track is because one was around delivering home fire safety visit training to operational crews, and another one was to upskill crews in prevention-based business fire safety activity. All that was planned, but we analysed the risk, and because we had an accelerated cause of concern around site-specific risk information, we prioritised that workload over this. But I'm happy to say that all the prevention activity for those 2 areas have been programmed in diary up to the end of November, and that training is actually being carried out at this moment in time, and we're on track to deliver that. So, in relation to culture, all 32 actions are on track or have been completed, and we've just got one that's off track for areas for improvement, and that is around rear-mounted mobilised
Rear-mounted MDTs, mobile data terminals.
Mobile data terminals, even I didn't know that. Yeah, mobile data terminals. And they've been retrofitted in the back now, and we're just going through a real rigid sequence of testing to make sure they're fit for purpose before we can analyse and put all the data on there. In relation to the HMIC FRS Spotlight report into values and culture, there were 18 actions, 16 have been completed. There's just one that is at risk of not being completed. We pushed the date back to the end of September for that one, and that was around a fire standard around leading the fire service. We're progressing that action. We had a really good, productive development session at SLT in February, where we came together and looked at what our fire standards mean as a group of people, senior leaders, and we've started to populate that. So we're now on track to deliver that as well. In relation to the round 3 revisit by HMIC FRS, HMIC carried out their first revisit between the 4th of December and the 8th of December last year. The service received a letter from HMI Wendy Williams on the 8th of March, that's on your Appendix 4, advising that 2 further revisits would take place in 2024. The first took place on the 19th of March and the 20th of March, and they focused on the accelerated causes of concern for the mobilising systemic control, and I believe that the Chief Officer is still awaiting feedback on those visits at this moment in time. In relation to the transformation team, you'll note that there are actually 9 actions that are off track with the transformation team. I'm not going to go all through all 9 that are in the table listed there, but basically it's down to reprioritisation of workload. Other pieces of work came in and they reprioritised, and they've just been slightly delayed. But we are very happy and confident that by the end of the transformation programme in March 2025, all those actions will be completed. And last, by no means least, the efficiency and savings, which is on page 56 of your report. We've now got an efficiency and savings team. They were in place on March the 1st, 2024. And they're designing the programme of works going forward for the next 12 to 18 months. They're focusing on the planning and implementation and transition to a crew model of 4 riders across whole time stations, except Hicksgate. planning a review of resource management processes to identify improvements in resource allocation and workforce planning. And they're also looking at the flexible rostering system for whole-time staff at Station 3, whole-time, which is Yates. So the project is still being fully scoped out, and I hope to report on progress in future PLC meetings. And just to finalise, I think there's been a huge amount of effort from teams across the service to progress these actions. Progress has been good, and it's been good to see departments prioritising workloads against risk, which is really satisfying to see. So just end there.
Yeah, thank you, Luke. Before I invite members for questions, just to clarify a bit around the efficiencies and around the crewing, obviously members voted not to make the necessary changes to our crewing models in this financial year. So just to clarify, that preparatory work is for future financial years, if and when we have to apply that, based on what we will know at that particular time around the funding, any funding deficit that we have. So just to clarify, we're not implementing, we're doing all the planning and preparation for if and when we have to implement it. So just for that clarity. And secondly, just on the progress tracker, particularly around the for the 2 accelerated causes of concern and the 2 causes of concern, some great news, I hope you agree, in relation to the tasks and completion of tasks, in particular for the mobilising and the risk information. That doesn't mean that work is stopped. Work is ongoing in making sure that those changes we've been made now are embedded and sustainable, to see that sustainable change and that sustainable a difference going into the future. So whilst we say we've finished the tasks, in essence we've implemented them, we're focusing on making sure that they're as I say, become part of our business now, not that we move on to the next thing. And that's the area of focus for conversations I've been having and presenting to the HMI. And the board and I, SLB colleagues and I, met week before last with our new His Majesty's Inspectorate, so a lady called Michelle Skier. Michelle is an inspector. Wendy Williams retired at the end of March. So Michelle, we had a virtual meeting with Michelle so she could get up to speed with where we are with all of our action plans. So I felt we had a very good story to tell, a very good narrative in terms of progress and the effort that's being put in right the way across the organisation. And she is physically coming into the service at the end of May, so we'll meet physically. And I have the next fire performance and oversight group in London on the 4th of June, where I hope to then present not only what you've heard today, but further progress between now and that particular date as well. I would like, though, for the record, before I invite members for questions, is to pay my acknowledgement and thanks for the huge amount of effort that all teams have undertaken. My team across SRB in getting to this stage, there's been a clear focus and priority. The various teams that operate on a day-to-day basis, and of course our operational crews in the effort that they've put in particular around this risk information. So thank you, members.
Thank you. And on behalf of the members, I think we'd all like to say thank you to everybody who's been involved in trying to address these somewhat challenging issues that we've got on board. And I will be watching you to see what happens. So that's a promise. Well, I couldn't possibly say, Richard, yeah. Right, I think you had a question? Yeah.
Yes, please, if I could. I'm just a councillor on the Fire Authority, but I really do have to register my concern about this report and behind it, the progress that has been made, but on inspection we've actually gone back. We were basically inadequate, and now we've gone to special measures using the terms that I use in terms of children's services. And that's a great worry, especially when they say there's insufficient governance, oversight and assurance. So I think I appreciate they're going to come back and do an inspection in September, but I do think we need to register our concern, or my concern as a councillor, about the current level of performance. Even though, I appreciate lots and lots of work is going on, and I don't want to devalue that, but I do think it is something as a fire authority we should be looking to be good or outstanding rather than just aiming to be inadequate. And I think that is an issue that has to be on the table for discussion. And as I say, there's nothing personal in making those comments, but it is a real issue because we represent the communities, and those communities in terms of inspectorate, I know it's just a snapshot every time they come in, but it is something that I'm genuinely worried about, and I've registered this before to you, Simon, and I do think we need to think, and especially just recently the BBC report, which whether it's accurate or whether it isn't, you know, that then gives the impression that the fire authority is not performing particularly well in terms of the culture for women within the organisation. So I think it's appropriate that I should make this comment at this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor, and I very much appreciate your concerns and your views, and I know we've had conversations about this since the publication of the report. I can reassure you it is not my aspiration to aspire to, requires improvement, inadequate or even adequate. My aspiration is to see this organisation on a platform that it deserves to be, and I know it's capable of being, good in all areas and excellent as an ideal journey. And I've set out those ambitions to the Home Office and also to His Majesty's Inspectorate as well, in particular around the journey and the expectation in terms of timescales and where we need to go. That's why now I am not just focusing on the task in hand, but also ensuring that they are sustainable actions, so they're actually achieving the outcomes that we start off anticipating the outcomes that we'd like to see. So not just, well, I've done that now, and I'm going to moving on. I want to really focus on all what we've promised doing, achieving the outcomes that we expect them to be in terms of improvement, to raise, obviously, the gradings for when we have future inspections as well. Just on that, in terms of the governance, they mentioned there about the governance councillor. Luke mentioned we had a revisit to look at the 2 accelerated cause of concern in December, and the HMI's response was published in January. I'm very pleased to say that they acknowledge the improvement in governance, both in recognition to our corporate risk register, the structures that I've put in place, we've referenced them today, and now this enhanced reporting mechanism in terms of dashboard and progress. And in March, when the HMI revisited in March specifically to look at the fire control mobilising aspect as well, they acknowledged all the work. In terms of verbally and a hot debrief, I'm yet to see the more formal response to that, but they acknowledged all of the hard work that the organisation has done, and once again recognised the improved governance arrangements and key performance indicators that were implemented in the service. Hopefully that gives you some reassurance, notwithstanding we've still got a lot of work to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that's difficult for me asking you the question and difficult you replying to that question. When that letter comes in, can that be made available to the committee for us to see? Because I think it is, we take your word on what they say verbally, but sometimes when it comes in writing, it can be more difficult. But it'd be pleased to see that.
Absolutely, Councillor. When we ever get any publication, we'll share it with members, and it also goes on a public platform as well for everybody to see.
We've shared everything that HMI sends us you get. I can assure you of that.
Sorry, Councillor, just to pick up on that. The revisit letter on the 8th of March does talk about it was some indications as well and future planning, which is in Appendix 4. They will be coming back in, like I say, in September to have a deeper dive on all of the 4 areas of cause of concern.
Any other comments?
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much. I don't disagree with what Councillor May said, but I think we do need to recognise the inspection and the report that we've got, again, in the appendix here, was last summer, autumn. We were all obviously disappointed, shocked, to say the least, when this came out. But I think we do need to recognise we are, 7-8 months past that now. And the green boxes we've got in front of us here, hidden behind those green boxes is an enormous amount of work and work well done. So I think we do need to congratulate people on what's happened and the speed in which that's happened. That's a lot to get done in a relatively short number of months. Just a few comments from me in terms of how this is presented, and this is something I've been banging on about for a while, so I really like the way this sort of dashboard presentation is great, and bringing all the different action plans together in one place so that we can see it is really, really helpful. And I think it's a big improvement on what we had in previous reports where we get 50 odd pages of detail and you can't see the wood for the trees. This is really great. I would assume that behind all of this, all that detail still exists. It's in the digital improvement register. Is that the right term? So I just wonder if, at some point in the future, we as members could get access, read-only access to that, so that if we wanted to dip in and see some of the detail behind these things, we could do so without, obviously, clearly read-only. We're not getting interfering, but it'd be good to be able to see some of that detail without having 50 pages of it in a report. The other thing that occurs to me is in the past, any member of the public who had wanted to could look at those 50 pages and see the detail, which now they can't. And while we definitely don't want 50-page reports with all of that in it, I just wonder if there is a way that interested members of the public could see that if they were interested in a particular area.
We can certainly have a look at that. Obviously, there's some, potentially, because there's people referenced within there, sort of a data protection, those sort of things, but absolutely. It's quite extensive, because it doesn't just cover our HMIC action plan. Now it's a digital continuous improvement framework, which is best practice. It's designed on best practice and industry best practice. It looks at all of the actions from our service plan and progress against our service plan. It covers our areas for improvement in HMI and also cause concern. It also covers our audits as well. So it's a full one-stop shop of where we are with all of our progress and our actions. Certainly we will look and see how we can provide access for members. And I think we've already started to have those discussions around how we can do that, and actually how we might be able to publish that on our website, even if it's just a snapshot. So for transparency purposes, I'll absolutely talk to the team around that. In fact, Ian wants to come in on that particular point.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, just on the publication side of things, we are required to publish our action plans against recommendations. So that's around the causes of concern, but not around areas for improvement. So we're currently looking at the Spotlight report and how best to present that to the public. So rather than we previously had like a Word document or a spreadsheet, is actually something that fits with our new website. So having it in HTML format. So we're just looking at that at the moment. Start with the Spotlight report, and then we'll move on to the causes of concern and get those published as well.
No, I had... Richard, I wasn't sure whether your hand was up or not.
I'm quite happy with the points.
That's fine, that's fine. In that case, I think it was Robert next, and then Robin.
Thank you, yes. I do share the concerns that Councillor May has indicated, in particular because I don't think it gives members of the public confidence in the service when we get the negative media reports and so on. So I do share that concern. But I was just wondering about the fact that regarding the revisit that took place the 19th and 20th of March and the fact that we haven't received any feedback from that, is that something we should be worried about, or is that normal since they're coming back again in September?
The September date was already pre-programmed in, so it was issued to us along with the March date as part of an ongoing connection into the HMI around our progress. But the reason why there's a slight delay in the publication, we've just gone through the fact-checking in terms of their findings, and we had to provide some more additional information a week or so ago to the HMI following some questions. But they're very conscious of PERDA, and they're very conscious of that political window. And when they came in, they did say to me, it's unlikely to be published until the very early stages of May. So that's the reason why the delay.
I was going to say, I think Robin was next on the list, yeah.
Thank you. Just a comment on the traffic light system, which is very useful as a new member of this authority to see kind of where we are. I'm assuming, of course, that this will continue. I suppose that my question is when we're reporting in, what I'm asking is when we're reporting in 3, 4, however months' time, that there's some way of referencing back to previous traffic lights, for want of a better way of putting it, so we can see kind of direction of travel, please.
We can certainly make sure we include that. Certainly, yeah, that's a good point.
And Councillor May, I think you wanted to come back.
Chair, thank you. When this first came up, we were told quite reasonably that we were in some of the front ones being inspected and that other fire authorities were being inspected. And the Appendix 3 quite clearly lays out the fact that this is a major issue across most fire authorities. Is it possible we could have possibly at the next meeting, a summary of what the current inspections are for other fire authorities? Because that would be really handy to see whether that has been something that has been replicated in other areas. We know about Gloucestershire and other places that have been there, but it'd be really handy for us to have some context in which we're having the discussion, please.
Yes, I think Ian wants to respond to that, Councillor, so yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So as each of the service inspections are published, there is that same traffic light system in a table on the HMI website. So you can look at the whole dashboard, if you like, and then you can go into any of the individual services and then into the individual judgments there. So everything that is done by HMI is all public information, and we can circulate the link to get to that first page.
I've noted that down. We'll provide you a link for that so you can find that easily yourself. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Or wait, right.
Thank you, Chair. I also wish to echo Councillor May's earlier comments, or first comments. My concern is also around the culture of the service, particularly where the report states that staff don't have the confidence to challenge poor behaviour. What specific actions are being taken to put in place to address this? Is there training for staff to broach difficult conversations with colleagues who are not meeting the principles of the service? Obviously, the principles we all know, but respectful, honest, courageous, ambitious, inclusive and transparent.
Yep, I'll let, Richard's leading on our culture action plan, so I'm sure Richard will be able to provide a response to that.
Thank you. You'll see from the traffic light system that there's been an awful lot of the actions in the culture action plan completed. One of the very first things we did was our independent reporting line. We recognised that the report highlighted that staff didn't have faith in the issues would get reported when they were dealt with, didn't want to stand up and be counted. So we immediately put in place, via our dignity and respect toolkit, a way of doing that, before we then subsequently moved to an external provider, Crime Stoppers, for our independent reporting line. That's been widely advertised across the service and used. Some not always in the correct way. Some things get, very minor things get reported via that route. And we do a return every quarter, I believe, on what issues have been raised and how they've been dealt with. We also now publicise the outcomes of any investigations, so the workforce can see that actually when issues are being raised, they're being dealt with very robustly. So I'm really, really comfortable that we are dealing with them with issues extremely robustly. The issue that we now continue to deal with is actually being told about those issues in the first place. And I think that's a cyclical thing of people seeing that are being dealt with correctly, robustly, and the visits that we do to stations and work units, just discussing those things and advertising it internally so people can see the outcomes. We are, I think without doubt, I think if you ask any one of us, we're certainly seeing a more confidence level, a higher confidence level of people willing to bring forward and discuss things that maybe they weren't that comfortable doing 18 months ago. And the figures are certainly telling us that from the reports we're getting.
we're also partway through 2-day managers course as well, particularly looking at how you address behaviours in the workplace. And that's being rolled out to all managers, so supervisory level right the way through to middle manager level as well. We're in the process of developing some middle manager development sessions, which will be a rolling basis as well to support our managers and our leaders, giving them the tools that they may well need. And furthermore, this month we'll see the launch of our professional standards board as well, which brings together key departments across the organisation to provide that consistency. In terms of investigations and the quality of investigations, if you may not recall, a councillor, that about 18 months ago I commissioned a independent review of our past discipline investigation cases. That came back with a number of recommendations. And we are implementing all of those. We've accepted and implemented all of those recommendations, one of which is to train all of our managers in conducting a fair investigation, investigation reports, and also performing the role of hearing officer should there be any discipline, need to go to a discipline hearing, as an example. So there are a number of different interventions that we are putting in place. But I do recognise that in being able to achieve a good, healthy working environment for all of our staff, it's not an overnight. And I've demonstrated this to the Fire Performance and Oversight Group around this incremental journey. And actually, when we're taking action, we're making sure that it's sustained within the organisation and it's achieving the outcomes. So it's a continual effort to do that. But you know, we are realistically not going to see a change. We'll do this today and it'll be different tomorrow. It's going to take some time to be able to do that. And that involves a whole range of different interventions, investment in our staff, you know, development in leadership, recognising poor behaviours and how to address them at the very early stages so they don't escalate. Very happy to share with you the details of our action plan, which hopefully will give you some indication of the work activity that's taking place.
One more thing, and we referenced it earlier around the media coverage, the negative media coverage recently. It could be seen negatively, the fact that people are coming forward and reporting issues to us. But I think it's fair to say we've been working closely with our colleagues in the FBU to encourage that. And I think the fact that people are now stepping forward can be seen very negatively, but actually it's a positive thing that people are feeling comfortable to be able to do that, knowing that they'll be listened to and that those issues will be addressed. So whilst some may see it as our numbers being negative, you know, when people do report things, personally I see that as a positive thing that people are comfortable to do it.
Right. Any more questions, or have we all had?
Sorry, Councillor May, you.
Sorry, I feel a bit uncomfortable with that. The fact they had to go to the media to do it rather than to us is a worry. So I don't see that as a positive. I still see that as a negative, I'm afraid.
No, apologies, Councillor. That's what I meant was our confidential reporting line being used. I see that as a positive, that people are feeling comfortable to be able to come forward and tell us about these issues because they know that we are dealing with them so robustly. Apologies for the confusion there.
Okay, anything else from anybody? I think everyone's had a...
So this report is just for noting and to make any recommendations. As you've been talking, a couple of recommendations have been made about the format of the report for next time. I've jotted those down, so I've taken them away as an action. So I don't think there's anything else we need to vote on, if you're comfortable with that. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 10, which is the 2023-24 Capital Programme update as at 29th of February this year. And Verity and Claire, I think you're presenting.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this is paper 10 in your bundle, starting on page 187. This paper brings to you the capital programme, so actuals for the 11 months to February 2024, and then a forecast outturn based on that for the full year. This report is for noting. There are two appendices to this report. So Appendix 1, which is on page 191, This gives you a summary of the 23-24 capital programme. So you can see the capital programme was approved at 6.3 million for this financial year. We have had some reprofiling adjustments, so there's £370,000 in that column, which is a pull forward from future years. So rather than affecting the overall capital programme, it's just a rephasing within the 3-year programme. There's £350,000 there for fleet, and then a small adjustment for operational equipment. The £350,000 for fleet was something that was reported to the previous meeting of this committee back in December. Just a reprofiling of spend relating to the Type B appliances and a Pioneer boat that was purchased this year. So total updated capital programme for the 23-24 financial year is 6.7 million, and our year-to-date spend up to the end of February was just under 5 million, with a forecast of 5.2 for the full year, so around £200,000 additional spend expected between February and March. We can see in the final column the forecast variance of 1.5 million, so I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail as I go through each item, because that isn't an underspend in total, some of that is reprofiling rather than underspend. And then Appendix 2 on page 193 gives you a view of the whole capital programme for the 3-year period. So you can see the 6.7 million for the current financial year we're looking at, and then the programme allocated for 24-25 and 25-26. Total programme across the 3 years is just under 12.5 million. This programme was the programme that was approved in February 2023. So we are comparing to the programme relating to the prior financial year rather than the one that was approved more recently, so which we know is a lot higher. So if I come back to the main body of the paper, and particularly section 5, starting on page 188, just to talk you through the main items of expenditure and the main variances to the budget for the year. So premises is the largest element of the capital programme for 23-24. We had allocated around 3.5 million. Up until the end of February, we spent about 2.5 million of that, with just under 2 million relating to the Bedminster work. We do have an expected further £200,000 spend within that area up until the end of the year, but we are seeing around £700,000 of underspend in that final column of Appendix 1. That's not an underspend, it's just a reprofiling of the Bedminster work spend. So that spend will be incurred in 24-25 as the Bedminster works are completed. That was taken into account when the updated capital programme was developed and then approved in the March Fire Authority meeting earlier this year. So that has been taken into account, that reprofiling into the new capital programme. Fleet spend, we've spent 1.8 million on final milestone payments for Type B appliances and some additional equipment, and also the Pioneer boat, which I mentioned earlier. We have spent that 1.8 million in full, so there's no further spend expected on fleet this year. In relation to other items, so we've spent £190,000 or just under in control on some radio replacements. We did have allocated £450,000 of budget within control this year, so there's an underspend against control, but again, that's not an underspend, that's a reprofiling and rephasing of spend, as there are significant control capital projects coming up in future years, and they form part of next year's capital programme as well. We have spent £172,000 on mobile the rear MDTs, which we mentioned earlier in the service improvement paper. That's come out of the transformation budget. Transformation had around 570,000 allocated for the year, and we've spent 172 there. So there's a bit of an underspend against transformation, and actually, as we've mentioned, the transformation programme is coming to an end. We've allocated £50,000 for next year for transformation, so the remainder of that is a genuine underspend against the programme this year. That's not a reprofiling. And the final one, just to mention, is IT. So we've spent around £115,000 on hardware replacements for the year. We're expecting to spend a little bit more before the end of the year, but there will be an underspend against IT, which again is not something that's carried forward into future programmes. The final bit I just wanted to mention was around the future capital programme. So obviously as I mentioned earlier, the programme that we're comparing to today was a programme that was approved in February 2023. We have now subsequently approved a capital programme for the 3 years starting 24-25, which is significantly higher. So we saw today in Appendix 2, the total capital programme we're looking at for the 3-year period that was approved in February last year is just under 12.5 million, but the new capital programme is over 34 million. So just to reiterate that new capital programme has been put in place with additional significant projects in place, most notably those in the premises area. So the Bath and Western redevelopments, which have been allocated £14.5 and £7.5 million respectively in that new programme. And paragraph 5.7 of this paper just reiterates the fact that there's an impact on our revenue budget of increasing our capital programme in terms of servicing the debt. and that impact has been taken into account when we've developed and approved the budget and medium-term financial plan for the next 4 years. And I think that kind of, I'll open up for questions.
Thank you. Richard, you.
Verity, thank you for that, very helpful. I want to focus purely on the premises budget and also specifically the Bedminster station. Actually, it falls about 10 yards outside my ward, so I sit every day regularly and see the physical improvements, of course. I'm just interested, was the capital budget or expenditure or fixed cost, or is there some variable overspend also?
As far as I'm aware, there's no planned overspend against that Bedminster project. It's just been a reprofiling of the spend. I don't know if Claire might be able to add to that.
So with all of the major capital projects in premises, there will be some contingency built into the budgets that we're given by the premises team. So that would be the only variable cost. The majority of it will be fixed through the quotes and the tender process. But yes, we would have some contingency within that budget. So as Verity said, we wouldn't expect there to be any additional spend.
Councillor May? Did you have a question just now?
I did, yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I got sidetracked by the iPad. I very much appreciate this report, and especially the reference back to the revenue implications that they're covered within the budgets. Can I just ask the question, are there any elements of the revenue expenditure that could be capitalised so that we can in actual fact carry out a bit more in terms of revenue? So you've covered the capital into revenue, but revenue, whether you could actually capitalise any of that. And I'm not expecting an answer right this minute, just to save you. But I mean, it might be worth having a think about that moving forward.
I mean, we can consider it. I would say there's unlikely to be anything significant within our revenue budget that would qualify for capital expenditure. We have a £5,000 kind of limit on capital expenditure, so anything below that amount our accounting policy is that we wouldn't capitalise it. So the majority of what's going through our revenue budget will be kind of consumable, ongoing day-to-day costs compared to capital costs, which are where we expect to see a benefit over a period of time. So it's something that we can bear in mind, but I wouldn't expect there to be anything significant that we could do. And also, in addition to that, anything that we added to the capital programme, we'd have to find a way to fund, which we know we're looking at borrowing.
Funding out over a longer period?
Potentially, if we could identify anything significant enough. So it's something we can bear in mind, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor, were you asking also around whether we make any revenue provisions into capital year on year? Was that part of your question? No. Right, okay, thank you.
Just a second. My question is also about relationship between revenue and capital. Where would I find the revenue consequences of capital spend? And that's not only in terms of potential spend to save, but also you're buying new kit, you're buying new equipment, there's maintenance and there's the rest. And I assume as well that if there is any slippage in capital spend, that could mean a consequential revenue implication as well. It's kind of following the question I made at the last board meeting, that the capital programme is a very powerful programme, and it's about improvement to the way we deliver a service, but it can also have a powerful revenue impact as well. And the Department of Unforeseen Consequences, sometimes capital gives you revenue consequences you don't anticipate. So where would I look for that, please?
I don't think we would have anything immediately available that we could show, but there's something we could probably pull together. So, for example, when we're looking at Bath as an example, we're obviously spending a significant amount of capital to redevelop and rebuild that station. So you're right, there would be expected revenue savings in terms of maintenance and things like that. So as well as the servicing of the debt, you might potentially see some savings from ongoing running costs as well. But I don't know if we've got something that pulls it all together across all projects.
No, so what did used to happen is during the members' briefings, any significant projects, the presentations that we would see as part of the capital steering group would go to members, and that would then detail what the things like the maintenance costs of projects that have been delayed might be. Within the actual revenue budget, you can see the impact on revenue of the capital financing on the capital financing costs line. So that's what it's actually costing us to fund our capital programme on an ongoing basis. But where we wouldn't have a separate line within that to show what the maintenance is for specific capital projects.
Just following up from that, I appreciate that, yeah. You borrow money, you've got to pay it back, there's whatever. But, for example, and this is top-of-the-head stuff, you're borrowing X amount of money, which is costing you debt servicing, but you're using it to put solar panels or a heat pump in the new station in Bath, which has a revenue implication. So I appreciate the direct costs, but there's also potential offset as well. And I think that reporting is useful for us to see about consequences on the revenue budget, but I also think it brings a cultural shift. Is there a way that we can actually use capital money and our capital budget in order to improve what is a difficult revenue position? And I know it's something we do within local authorities, and just wondering where I've looked for that here.
So at the moment, we are actually reviewing the business case process, and part of that is to start to identify benefits as part of a business case. So for any significant capital project, you would obviously see a business case for approval, and that's where we would then identify what the potential benefits of that project would be. Is that what you meant by that, the benefits realisation? So yes, that is part of the new business case that we're looking at developing across the service.
In addition to that, part of our estates programme does show the cost of running a station per square metre, so it gives a figure. And part of the business case that you will see in the next Policy and Resources Committee in July will be specific around the estates programme and the redevelopment and rebuild of Bath Fire Station and also Weston. And within there you'll have the comparators around what it currently costs us per square metre and what it will cost us if we do the developments, and then therefore the impact on running costs year on year on the revenue as well. So that should be in the business case next time you see that in July.
I'd just like to add that business cases do already include a lot of information of this nature. So you have seen, I realise business cases have been elevated now, haven't they? So they only come to this committee when they're £1 million and over. Previously, used to consider much lower business cases, and I've certainly read in lots of business cases all the benefits that would be realised in terms of savings to revenue. So I don't think it's quite fair to say we've never done it. I think we're getting better at it, but I have seen reports in previous packs. I look at Tanya, because Tanya's the author of most of those reports, and she's probably sitting there thinking, is nobody going to say this for me? So.
Yes, I didn't mean to imply that it wasn't done. It's where do I look for it, and the fact that quite rightly, I mean, it shouldn't get involved in as a councillor, I'm well aware that there's two ways that officers can keep councillors in the dark. First of all, tell them nothing, and the second way is tell them everything. So certainly don't need to say all the business case stuff. But some of those bits and pieces that you pick about revenue implications actually add up and can be quite significant.
Chair, can I just explain a little bit more about how local government, and I hope Robin's not listening to this, but I mean, increasingly around capital budgets, we've been able to put in staffing into the capital schemes so you can actually offset the revenue costs for the staffing into the capital schemes. So there are ways in which you can, in actual fact, bring down your revenue expenditure by using the capital system. And that was the question I was asking right at the start, just to make sure that you have a look at that again just to see whether there are any areas that you could offset.
Verity was scribbling as you were speaking, so we will take that.
I have, yeah, I've written that down to have a look at. Thank you.
Monies that we hold for treasury management, we try to also use the cash that we hold in our bank accounts to invest that, to see that return as well. And we presented to you the treasury management strategy back in March, and that demonstrates where we, if we do hold chunks of money for capital, as an example, and not needed to access it immediately, then we'd invest in that and get a return on that investment to try and help the revenue. Or just to increase the capital expenditure that we have available.
Any final questions on this one? This is the capital paper. So I've got the committee's asked to note the 23-24 current capital spend position and consider the updates provided to gain assurance on the 3-year approved capital programme. So nothing needed to vote on. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor May, you've got your hand.
I'm voting, sorry.
Oh, okay. You're voting. Okay, thank you.
Right, okay. In that case, we can move on to item 11, which is the 2023-24 Revenue Budget Monitoring Report as at 29th of February. And back to you again, Verity.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is paper 11, page 195 of your bundles. Again, we're looking at the 11-month year-to-date actual spend. This is against the revenue budget, and then looking at the full-year forecast outturn based on those actuals. So as with the capital paper, this one is for noting again. There are, again, 2 appendices to this paper. So Appendix 1 is on page 199 of your bundles, and that gives you a summary of the revenue budget for the 23-24 financial year. And Appendix 2 just gives you a bit more detail, so it's broken down into a little bit more detail for you there. Both of these appendices show right at the bottom the total expected underspend or overspend for the full year. And we're looking at around £140,000 underspend at this point in time. When we reported to this committee back in December, based on the October actuals, we were looking at a similar position. Actually, it was around £130,000 underspend that was reported at that point in time. So the overall position against the revenue budget for 23-24 hasn't changed significantly over the last sort of 6 months or so. But what has happened, there have been some different variances and movements in between. So what I'll do is, if I move on to section 5 of the paper, I'll just pick out the key variances to kind of talk you through. And the first one being income. So the income lines, the overall income, we've actually seen almost £1 million of over-recovery on income, which sounds like a big number. When compared to what was reported in December, based on the October actuals, that was actually a similar number again. There has been a slight switch between the lines, so one's gone up and one's gone down. But this over-recovery can be attributed to 3 main areas. So the first is the business rates relief grant. So this business rates relief grant is received, but then the reconciliation process is completed the following year. So for the year ended March 2023, the reconciliation process has been completed during 23-24. When we reported in December, based on October, we had a kind of partial reconciliation and expectation of what that was going to look like for the full year, which resulted in us at the time reporting an over-recovery of £540,000. The final reconciliation has now been completed. That was done in January. And we're now looking at around £350,000 over recovery on that line. So you can see it changed a fair bit over the last few months, and that relates to the prior financial year. The second area of over recovery in income is on investment income. Again, that's something that we've reported previously to this committee. So interest rates have been a lot higher during this financial year when compared to previous interest rates that we've seen over past financial years. So we have, on average, received interest at around 4.7% across the year, so quite significant when compared to previous years. So we've got around £500,000 of investment income for the year. And the final item is kind of other income that we have, which is made up of a number of small things most of the time. And the most significant items to really pull out and make you aware of there's around £150,000 of over-recovery in relation to kind of recharges and recoveries. And a big contributor to that was the SWAST reconciliation. So again, it related to the year ended March 2023. The reconciliation was done late and we weren't aware that there was anything more due to come to us. There's also been some additional income. It's around £60,000 from learning and development. So it's in relation to the apprenticeship schemes that we run for the firefighters as well. So we have seen a quite significant over-recovery in income. But what we can see as we move through the expenditure lines is that we've got some additional costs in there as well. So this over-recovery of income has helped to mitigate some of those costs and leaves us in a position where we've got a slight underspend on the budget for the full year. So moving on to employee costs. So employee costs are the most significant kind of group of costs for the service. And paragraph 5.4 there just kind of notes that all three of the pay awards are reflected within the numbers that we're presenting to you today. So all of Gold, Grey and Green Book pay awards are in there. There are a few variances across the various lines within employee costs, but I'll just pick out the main ones here. So we've got an underspend on on-call firefighter costs of around £350,000. That's similar to what was reported last time as well. And that is just as a result of lower than expected call-outs for the on-call firefighters. But where we have seen a movement is in corporate staff. So the corporate staff budget, we've got an overspend of around £500,000 against the corporate staff budget, and there are a number of reasons for that. We've got some additional resource in there, so things like resource in the SSRI teams. We've talked today about HMIC FRS and particularly the Spotlight report. There's some additional resource that the service is employed to ensure that we deliver against those programmes. What we have done as well is switched a little bit from grey to green book. So we have moved some positions from being grey book to green book, so they become corporate staff roles now. So that's also resulted in a little bit of overspend there. The pay award for corporate staff was forecast to be 4% when we set the budget. And actually what happened was it was a flat rate, around £1,900 per person. So obviously for some people that equated to more than 4%, and for some people that was less. So that resulted in around £200,000 extra corporate staff costs for the year. Other elements to mention in employee costs are around the pension scheme, the pension costs. So again, these were mentioned last time, but there's a significant overspend there, around £350,000. Which is as a result of the 2022 Mercer valuation of the pension fund, and it identified an increased deficit on that pension fund and a 3-year recovery plan. This is the first of the 3-year recovery plan and something that we were not aware of at the time of setting the 23-24 budget. So we've had to pay a contribution to that deficit of around £370,000 during the year. There are 2 more years of that deficit to be paid in 24-25 and 25-26, but we have now budgeted for those as part of the medium-term financial plan process, so we shouldn't see variances in that going forwards, but those costs will be uplifted for the following 2 years as well. In terms of premises costs, we're seeing an overspend of around £170,000 in premises. This has mainly been down to additional payments for our site here in Portishead. So we pay a service charge, but we are also required to contribute towards any capital improvements that are made to the site as well. So, and they're a little bit difficult to forecast. So we've had an overspend there on that line because of that. Supplies and services is another area where we've had significant movement, actually in this case an underspend. And there's 3 main movements in that line. We have overspends in kind of the fees and services line. That partly relates to delivery of the HMIC FRS Spotlight report, so things like DBS checking and introduction of the confidential reporting line, so the costs associated with that, and also increased legal costs as well on that line. But we have also seen underspends in this area to kind of result in the overall underspend in supplies and services. First of all, lower than expected training costs, but the main overspend has been because of the introduction of a new inventory management module within our financial accounting system. So what we've done is introduce better controls over our inventory management, and actually what it's meant is that for during the year we have got more inventory on our balance sheet than we previously held as a result of kind of improving the controls and the records we've got around that inventory, and it's therefore resulted in a credit in the income statement. That is in the I&E. That is a one-off benefit from kind of improving the controls over that. And what will happen is as that PPE, so the inventory, is used, we'll see the charges come through the I&E in future years. The final thing I just wanted to mention on the variances is the £500,000 within other costs. So there's a £500,000 overspend within other costs, which is our contribution from the revenue budget to the capital programme during 2023-24. That is something that we proposed again earlier on in the year when we reported to this committee. And it's something that's been taken into account as we generated the future capital programme for 24-25 onwards. But just to kind of point out that it is separate to the proposed £500,000 contribution from revenue to capital that we looked at as part of the 24-25 revenue budget setting process. That's different and was a separate one that we've since removed. This one is for 23-24 and has been taken into account and assumed to go into the capital reserve at the end of this year to help fund the capital programme next year. And that kind of brings me on to the final thing I wanted to really mention again is future years with the revenue budget. So we're fortunate this year that we have a small underspend and we're working now, the finance team are working now to kind of close the March 24 year end and build the financial statements to be published at the end of May. But as we've seen going forwards, we've got significant pressure on our revenue budget over the medium term, and a lot of that pressure is coming from the capital programme and servicing that debt. So linking to the paper that I presented earlier again, and the kind of level of borrowing that we're going to have to incur in order to service that debt and fund the capital programme. And I'd open up for any questions.
Really a question, Verity, but just to say, can I thank you and the team for a hard job well done. I've commented before, perhaps we'll second your team to Bristol City Council. That could only improve the picture.
I'll ignore that one. Taking advantage, Richard, you are today. Robert. Sorry, no, Councillor May, I think it was you.
Thank you. Two questions. One is probably just a daft question, but I don't know. You're the statutory finance officer. Local authorities have the Section 151 officers. Do you actually meet on a regular basis with the Section 151 officers?
Of the fire service or of the local...
With the local authorities?
Not with the local authorities, but I hold that role for the fire service. I still hold the same kind of role, but for the fire service. And we do have a fire finance network, so a community of people in similar position to myself that would meet on a regular basis, yeah.
Oh, thank you. And the second one was, within the recording, there was about 522,000 savings coming from the operational side, but increases of something like 863,000 on, if you like, the bureaucracy. And it's just a question about whether we're getting the balance right as an organisation.
Is this in terms of the staff costs?
Yeah.
I think the...
sorry, page 201, the section B, expenditure, employee costs.
Okay, yeah. So employee costs, I mean, we have seen a significant increase in the corporate staff costs this year, but I think that reflects the kind of move that we've had. Some of the roles that we've had to create to address some of the actions that we've needed to do have been corporate roles. Obviously, the pay award impacted a little bit on that as well. I mean, the underspend on things like the retained fire, so the on-call firefighters is just down to call-out rate, so there's not necessarily anything that we can do to kind of control that level. There is a slight underspend on full-time firefighters, and that's linked to what I mentioned around switching from grey book to green book, so where certain roles have just been moved from being an operational role to within the corporate role profile.
An example of that would be either in prevention or protection, where historically there may well have been operational they fall under an operational job description, as for want of a better word, or establishment level, and where we've had difficulty filling those posts through transfers or whatever that may be, or selection, we've done restructures which enable those posts to become non-operational, so green book, and it's just a fluctuation in the different establishment levels, which are the finance allocation against salaries needs to catch up from that. And that's kind of that rebalance what you see in there.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? No. So, the next one is item 12. Procurement forward plan, 250k to 1 million, snapshot dated 9th of April 24, and Tanya is going to present that.
Thank you, Chair. So this is regular for this meeting. You asked as part of the new, well, not so new governance processes to see anything that we've got on our pipeline that's above or estimated to be above 250,000 in contract value coming up. So that's what this list is. The ones in the highlighted are the elements that we estimate will be over £1 million in spend, so that you will see a business case in relation to those if you haven't already. So, for example, mobilisation system you saw in December last year. So you'll see I've started to add when it's been approved and things like that, so you know who's approved it and which board, etc., to these columns. I've also added some bits and pieces like Bath and Western onto this list, because as a procurement team we're obviously working very closely with premises to start preparing business case, etc., that you'll be able to see. So sometimes you will see that you're on the pipeline, we're starting to do the work before it's decided one way or another, and then we'll either remove it or not, as the case may be, as the authorisation proceeds. I'm not planning to go line by line into these items. I don't think you'll thank me for it. But obviously, if you do have any questions, do let me know.
Okay, any questions? No? Well, we've stunned them into silence. Thank you very much for that, Tanya. Yeah. Okay. Right, item 13 on the agenda is the date of the next meeting, which is Thursday the 25th of July at 10:30, and the venue for that will be Seven Park Training Centre. And I will be thinking of all of you. In fact, I might even tune in to watch it if I'm really, really bored. Sorry. So that concludes today's meeting, and I now would like to exclude item 14, exclude the press and public. To resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business on the grounds that they contain exempt information pursuant to Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972, and that in accordance with Schedule 12A, Part 2, Paragraph 10 of the Local Government Acts 1972, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Right. Can I have a seconder, please? Richard, thank you. And can I see votes in favour of that? Yeah. That's unanimous. Right. Thank you very much.